What if the greatest man of the steppe, Genghis Khan, had failed right from his first steps? A big question that could have sent history in a completely different direction. History records Temujin uniting hostile Mongol tribes, establishing the largest empire in the world. He transformed Mongolia from a barren land into a powerful force, shaking the entire Eurasian continent. But what if he had not succeeded? Would the Mongol Empire have ever existed? And would our world have been shaped completely differently? Let's explore this alternative historical scenario. In the late 12th century, the Mongol steppe was a chaotic scene. Nomadic tribes competed, waged war, and kidnapped each other, creating a land of constant instability and violence. Temujin, having endured a childhood full of hardship and betrayal, rose from being an outcast. These challenges forged his extraordinary will and determination. He gradually built strong alliances through exceptional military talent. His innovative tactics and ability to command armies helped him defeat formidable enemies. Temujin's extraordinary leadership attracted and retained loyal warriors. He inspired them with his vision and fairness, transforming them into a unified force. The promulgation of strict laws, the yasa, created order and discipline. This was the first Mongol legal code, a foundation for the empire's later stability and development. He defeated enemies, gradually incorporating opposing tribes. From fierce confrontations, Temujin turned them into part of his strength, constantly expanding his influence. By 1206, Temujin was honored as Genghis Khan, ruler of all. A solemn ceremony marked the complete unification of the Mongol tribes. This event was the solid foundation for the great conquests that followed. It ushered in a new era, completely altering the political and cultural map of Eurasia for centuries. And the birth of the Mongol Empire, one of the largest and most influential empires in human history, began at that moment on the steppe. If Temujin had failed, it is highly likely that the Mongol tribes would have continued to be mired in incessant civil wars. There would have been no common voice, no direction whatsoever. Ceaseless power struggles would have torn the steppe apart. Tribes would have constantly clashed, with no one strong enough to establish lasting dominance. There would have been no leader strong and talented enough to unite them. Temujin would not have appeared, or he would have failed, leaving Mongolia without the necessary outstanding leader. They would have remained weak, small groups, easily assimilated. The steppe would have become prey for powerful surrounding empires, losing its autonomy. Neighboring empires like the Jin dynasty in China would have sought to annex them. The resource-rich northern lands could have been incorporated into Jin territory, expanding its influence. Similarly, the Western Shu Empire would also have had opportunities to expand its power. They could have turned parts of the steppe into dependent territories, or directly annexed them into their empire. Or the Khwarezmian Empire in Central Asia would have brought them under its rule. A powerful Islamic force from the West could have extended its influence deep into the steppe. Even another leader, less talented and ambitious, might have risen. That person would have tried to unite a portion of the tribes, but without achieving a large scale. This alliance would likely not have been strong enough to create an empire. It would have been merely a loose confederation, easily dissolved when facing greater external challenges. Unification might have been limited to a small geographical area. Lacking the ability to conquer other major civilizations, they would have maintained only local power. Without the Mongol threat, neighboring empires would have consolidated power. The Jin dynasty in China could have continued to maintain control over the north without being weakened. The Khwarezmian Empire in Central Asia would have become a dominant power. Without facing devastating confrontation, they would have expanded their influence continuously, creating a different Central Asia. The Silk Road might still have existed, but would have been less safe. Without the Pax Mongolica, banditry and local wars would have disrupted the flow of trade. This would have slowed down the exchange of goods and technology between East and West. Important inventions might have taken centuries to spread, or never arrived. Ideas and cultures would also have been restricted in their exchange. The unique blend that the Mongols brought would not have occurred, leading civilizations to develop in greater isolation. The Mongol steppe would have forever fragmented, sinking into incessant chaos. The tribes, unable to unite, would always have been easy targets for stronger surrounding empires. Without a visionary leader, the Mongol tribes would have existed only as small, weak, and vulnerable groups, unable to exert influence. The absence of a Genghis Khan would have left a power vacuum. The tribes would never have overcome the cycle of struggle, remaining fragmented pieces. They would have become vassals or borderlands, exploited by neighboring empires. Mongol autonomy might have disappeared permanently, sinking into oblivion. Another leader might have emerged, but his alliance would have been limited. Lacking the talent for complete unification, he would have created only a much smaller power. This alliance would not have been strong enough to resist larger empires. They could only have maintained autonomy within a narrow region, always living under the shadow of external threats. This unification would not have lasted, easily dissolving due to internal or external pressures. Tribal disputes would have erupted again, shattering any attempts at consolidation. This emerging power would not have been able to conquer major civilizations. They would have lacked the army, logistics, and strategy to carry out large-scale campaigns. Neighboring empires like the Jin dynasty would have consolidated power. Unattacked by the Mongols, they would have had a more stable dynasty, potentially extending their rule for centuries. The Jin dynasty would have continued to maintain control over northern China. This region, spared from war, would have sustained continuous prosperity and cultural economic development. Without incessant wars with the Mongols, the Jin dynasty would have focused its efforts on internal development. They might have become a superior regional superpower. The Khwarezmian Empire would have become a dominant empire in Central Asia. Without destructive confrontation, they could have expanded their borders to the east and west. Cities like Samarkand and Bukhara would have retained their splendor. They would have continued to be important centers of trade and scholarship without being devastated. Western Shia would also have consolidated and expanded its territory. They would not have been squeezed between two major powers, maintaining independence and developing much more stably than known history. The Silk Road would still have existed, but less safely. Lacking the protection of the Pax Mongolica, it would have been fraught with dangers from banditry and local conflicts. These trade routes would have been frequently disrupted. Merchants would have hesitated to take risks, significantly reducing the volume and frequency of trade between civilizations. This would have slowed down the exchange of goods, technology, and ideas. Inventions like gunpowder and the compass might not have spread quickly from east to west. Cultural exchange between civilizations would also have been limited. Cultures would have developed more independently, missing opportunities to learn from and influence each other. Major cities would have been less safe and prosperous. Restricted trade would have impacted the economy, preventing urban centers from developing strongly. The dissemination of technologies like papermaking, printing, or advanced agriculture would have occurred much more slowly. This would have affected humanity's overall progress. Sea routes might have become more important, but also faced risks of piracy. This could have led to the earlier development of alternative maritime trade routes. China might have experienced more native dynasties. Without the Mongol Yuan dynasty, Chinese history would have taken a completely different, possibly more stable, path. The political map of Eurasia would have retained its old borders for longer. The division of power would have changed little without major upheavals like the Mongol conquests. Eastern Europe would not have been ravaged and enslaved by the Golden Horde. Slavic kingdoms could have developed more strongly, forming larger, unified nations earlier. Islamic states in the Middle East could have continued their golden age. Unaffected by Mongol destruction, they would have maintained cultural, scientific, and artistic prosperity. Trade through the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean could have developed more strongly. As the overland Silk Road became less safe, sea routes would have become the preferred option. Military technology might have developed more slowly. The Mongol Wars spurred innovation in weapons and tactics, which would not have occurred to the same extent. The populations of Asia and Europe would not have suffered severe declines. The Mongol conquests caused the deaths of millions, which would have been avoided. The development of Russia could have been entirely different. Without Mongol rule, Russia might have unified earlier or developed into multiple independent states. Japan and Southeast Asia would not have faced Mongol invasions. This would have allowed native cultures to develop more freely without external threats. Europe might have had less contact with Eastern civilizations. The lack of cultural exchange would have slowed the Renaissance or shaped it differently. The emergence of great empires like the Ottoman could have unfolded differently. Their rise might have been influenced by a different political context in Central Asia and the Middle East. Relations between Christianity and Islam could have been different. Without anti-Mongol alliances or devastation, tensions between the two religions might have evolved in another direction. Internal trade routes in China would have prospered more. The lack of a threat from the northern border would have allowed the empire to focus on domestic economic development. Inventions like paper money printing might have had a different history. Their spread would have been affected by less safe and less unified trade routes. The development of art and architecture might have taken a different path. Each civilization would have retained its unique style, less influenced by Mongol interaction. The formation of languages and dialects might have been different. The lack of large-scale Mongol migration and ethnic mixing would have altered the linguistic map. Exploration and discovery of the New World might have slowed down. Europe, lacking the impetus and information about the East provided by the Mongols, might have delayed or altered the path of discovery. Agriculture and irrigation systems would have continued to develop locally. There would have been no consolidation of agricultural knowledge and techniques from different regions as under the Mongols. Naval forces might have developed more strongly in China. The lack of a major land-based threat could have prompted dynasties to focus more on maritime power. The power of the clergy and religion might have been greater. In a less militarized world, religious institutions could have maintained a broader influence in society. Spice trade routes might have faced more difficulties. The lack of stability on land routes could have made spice transportation more expensive and perilous. Biodiversity might have been different. The Mongol conquests had an impact on the environment, and without them, some ecosystems might have been better preserved. Financial and banking systems might have developed more independently. The lack of a vast trade network could have led to more localized, less connected financial systems. Literature and poetry might have reflected a less chaotic world. Works would not have had themes of war and conquest, but would have focused on internal issues and peace. Immediately, if Genghis Khan had failed, The world would not have witnessed a formidable cavalry army. Thousands of Mongol warriors would not have brutally swept across Eurasia. Cities like Samarkand would not have faced the terror of Mongol hooves. Its architectural beauty and vibrant culture would have been preserved intact. Baghdad, the academic and cultural center of Islam, would not have been devastated. The Beit al-Hikmah library and millions of books might have been saved. Kiev and other Slavic kingdoms in Eastern Europe would not have been attacked. They would not have suffered devastation and domination under the yoke of the Golden Horde. Even Vienna might not have faced the Mongol threat. Europe would not have experienced the fear of an invasion from the east, changing the political landscape. China would not have been unified under the Yuan dynasty. Native dynasties might have continued, or other dynasties would have emerged, but not by the Mongols. Islamic states would not have been devastated as severely as in history. Many major cities, libraries, and cultural centers would have been protected, continuing to develop. The political map of Eurasia would have retained its old borders for longer. Stability would have lasted, or developed in completely different directions, without influence from the steppe. The world would not have seen intervention from a new superpower emerging from the steppe. A more peaceful era, or a different series of local conflicts, would have unfolded. In the long term, within 100 to 200 years, the absence of the Mongol Empire would have created a completely different world. Every civilization would have developed along its own trajectory. Without Mongol destruction, affected civilizations could have continued to flourish. The Middle East might have prospered more, maintaining its vibrant culture. Eastern Europe might have remained fragmented or formed new alliances earlier. Slavic states would have developed independently, unaffected by the Golden Horde. The spread of the Black Death, which was linked to Mongol trade routes, might not have occurred, or at least much more slowly, minimizing its damage. Other empires might have risen and vied for power, but perhaps none would have achieved the global scale and influence that the Mongols once did in history. Cultural and technological exchange between East and West might also have been limited. This would have slowed the development of some important global sectors. The age of exploration might have unfolded differently. Europe, lacking the knowledge of the East brought by the Mongols, would have redefined the motives and goals of its expeditions. Chinese, Islamic, and European nations might have maintained their distinctiveness. Without strong cultural mixing, cultures would have developed along purer paths. In summary, a world without the Mongol Empire is an incredibly complex and different picture. Every aspect, from politics and economics to culture, would have a new appearance. The hypothesis of Genghis Khan's failure opens a door to a vastly different world. It emphasizes the importance of an individual in human history. One decision, one individual, can completely change the course of history. From the fate of empires to the destiny of millions, everything could have been different. The world we know today might not have existed without the Mongol hooves and the iron will of Genghis Khan. Share your thoughts or propose new historical hypotheses.